started with Search API adventures with Sherlock Holmes.
You have decided to follow in the footsteps of the great Sherlock Holmes and start your own search adventure. Meet with Anna Mykhailova, a web development team leader at London, Ontario's Digital Echidna. She will help guide you through Search API challenges.
Well, thank you, Mr. Holmes. It's such a great thing that we all gathered here today and you found the footsteps of great Sherlock. So today we will be diving into his adventure and learning how to configure Search API from scratch in Drupal 8. To follow his steps, we need to open the first node.
To begin your journey, you must gather information about the Search API module. Open terminal and enter drush dl search underscore API hyphen y. Drush en search underscore API hyphen y.
Thanks for your instructions, Mr. Holmes, and I was a little bit proactive, and you never know if there is internet connection at camp, so I already downloaded Search API for us, but let's enable it. So this is just a default Drupal install, and if we navigate to the Extend tab, we can search for search. And you can see we have a collection of modules in here. One is Search API, an extension of it, Search API taxonomy term handles that allows to handle taxonomy. We will cover it a little bit later. And a database search, which is basically a default backend for the search, so it allows you to play with the Search API module without installing SOLR and other custom backends that can take a lot of time to install, and that allows you to play with it on your local. So let's enable all of those. Scroll down and click install. Now, while still loading, Mr. Holmes always taught me that we need to establish a baseline for every single case. So for me to establish our baseline, I need to ask you a couple questions. Who's here a D7 developer, Drupal 7 developer? Drupal 8 developer? Okay. Who has experience with Search API on Drupal 7? Good, so you will find it familiar, and Drupal 8 Search API didn't change as much, so it will be a very easy onboarding process for you. Who has a base understanding of content types? Okay, everybody, so we will not stop on that as much. And who worked with views? Awesome. Entire audience, I don't have to do introductions of views today. It's great. So we enabled our modules and we are ready for the next set of instructions. So, Mr. Holmes, what should we do next?
Overwhelmed? Confused?
Sometimes, yes.
The community is here for you. Start with the example module and documentation.
Really, that's a great advice. You know, you come for the code, but as they say, you stay for community. So the first thing you do when you install a new module you have never worked with, you go to Drupal.org and you browse through the documentation and you read how to install it and examples and everything else. But community went a little bit further for you, and if we search for search in here again, you can see that there is a database search defaults, which is basically an example module that allows you to start playing with Search API immediately. You don't even have to configure anything. It pre-configures everything for you, so you can start playing with it, searching out, and actually understanding how the correct setup for the default Search API is. We will skip that because we are a little bit more adventurous and we are ready to follow Mr. Holmes further.
Start by setting up a server at /admin/config/search/search-API. Once done, set up the index, identify entity types, content bundles, and fields.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Mr. Holmes, that's a little bit too much, you know? And you said just a lot of interesting words like identify entity types, content bundles, and fields. That sounds a little bit overwhelming. Let's take it one step at a time. So you said we need to go to Search API administration page. So right now, if I go here in Configuration, Search and Metadata, Search API, we'll land on Administration page. And there are two buttons. One says Add Server and Add Index. As Sherlock advised us, we need to start with the server. We click on Add Server, and we will fill out a form to create our server. So first things first, every server needs a name. So let's call it a Badcamp Search. And we will need to enable our server. You can supply a description. It's useful when you work with multiple servers, or if you do one testing server and plan to create a new one later. So I advise to put a description at least for yourself. And you can see there is a list of backends. So if you have SOLR, Elasticsearch set up, you will have them listed in here. We enabled our database search module, which provided us with database backend, which means that all your index data will be living in your database. That's not an ideal scenario, and this backend is limited, but it's just for the demo purposes. We're using it today. And you can see that it provides some configuration options for the database backend. So I have two databases set up in my settings PHP. So I have default and legacy. We will go with default. And minimum word length. This is an important setting. It really affects your performance. So minimum word length is amount of characters that the word will be split into when indexed. So let's say you have the word homeowner, you will split it into home and owner. So you define how long can be the keywords in which you split your main word when you do stemming. And who is familiar with stemming? Yes? So for those who don't, I'll give you an example. So stemming is creating forms of the word based on the base part of the word. So let's say I do, I'm doing, I did, all of that will be parts of the word, will be stemmed out. So you add in ending parts of suffixes of the word, and you also do a bare bone of the word, so the root of the word. And then SOLR, the database backend in our case, it does it automatically for you. So when you're searching, for example, for test, it will also return results for tests, testing, tested, and things like that. So that's very useful. So this setting is for defining how big the keyword can be. And you would say, well, why not one word or one character, 3 characters? That's because as shorter the length, as more the keywords will be created in the process of indexing, and as more the keywords, as bigger the index, as more of the server it will take. So if you don't have a big server resources with a lot of memory, it will affect your performance. So be very careful with that setting. So 3 is usually an optimal length for this. And then, of course, this setting doesn't take any effect if you don't enable search in parts of the word. So you just enable this out and it's safe. So Mr. Holmes said that we need to define bundles and fields, but where should we do this? If we go in back to our configuration, search and metadata, search API, you see that now we have our server, but there is also another button that says Add Index. So search works as 2 parts. You can think about it as an outlet and a plug. So your server is an outlet, and index is a plug. So you plug in index inside the server. So index identify what structure of information need to be taken on, and server just provides the mechanism or classes for you to crawl through this index and basically store the data and then return it when the user queries it up. So we already made our outlet. Now we need to make a plug. We'll add an index, And again, index needs a name, so let's add a badcamp index. Data sources. So this is what Mr. Holmes defined as bundles and entity types. Everything in Drupal is an entity. So to understand the entity as as a thing in Drupal, let me know who played video games. Who played Super Mario? So Mario is an entity, and Goomba is a different entity, and all of his enemies are entities. So entity is an instance of something. So in Drupal we have our own Super Mario, it's content. So files will be another entity, let's say Goomba, or users will be another entity, and taxonomy terms are another entity. So entity is like a container with properties that are gathered together. And in Drupal 8 it's so awesome because all of these data sources are actually inheriting from entity API with some changes. So we can index all of them. As you know, in Drupal 7 we couldn't index even half of these ones, but now we can index even custom blocks and files and links. So we will start with content for this demo.
Sorry, could you zoom
with this demo, so we will do just the content. Because we choose the content, we need to configure the data source. First thing first, it's a bundle. So bundle, as you all know, that's a fancy name for the content type. Or can think about it as something nice and friendly. We bundle all together, so we gather together, we bundle all our fields together, we get a bundle. So we have two content types enabled in Drupal by default. It's article and basic page. So if we keep those unchecked, those both will be selected and indexed. Languages, we don't have a multilingual site, so it's just English. And we need to select a server. So in here, we do badcamp server that we just configured. We scroll down and we expand index options. So there are two checkboxes. One is read only. You will only would like to have this if you don't have a local SOLR. You brought in database on your computer and you have SOLR set up on your other server and you're still able to connect from your local to that server. And then you would like to have read-only. Why? Because usually you may create some, test changes, you create test articles, or your steamer creates some test scenes, and that actually can get into the index and then will be found by users on your production site. So on your development on test, you enable that as read-only. When you do in a live development, you keep this unchecked. And this one, index item immediately. This is another dangerous setting. It's very powerful. It means that when the editors make changes to your content, then the content is getting into index immediately. It means that it will be discovered immediately. However, there is a downside. So if you update the content in a big batches, so let's say you're running recurring import or feeds import or migration, and you put it as index immediately, this is a huge performance hit. Or let's say you have a huge team of editors, like 20-50 editors working at the same time, and it has index immediately, this will create a performance hit as well. But we don't have anybody working on it, just me, so we can keep it on. And cron batch size, if you uncheck index immediately, your items will be indexed on cron. So this is the size of the batch that will be run during one cron operation. The downside for that is if you have a big site and a lot of cron jobs running, cron tasks every hour, and you have, like, let's say 20,000 items, 20,000 nodes to index, your cron batch size is only 50, so it will probably not finish in one cron operation. So you'll have to do in second hour, it will index a little bit more, in the third hour a little bit more, so you might not have as up-to-date search results. So if it's crucial for your site, consider bumping it up or keep this index immediately option on. There is two buttons in here, save and add fields, and Mr. Holmes told us that we need to add fields, so we click on this one. This is a fields interface. I like how they changed it from Drupal 7. It's actually a very nice expandable tree, and when I mean expandable, when you click on this plus, it allows you to see additional field properties that can be indexed separately. For example, body field has summaries that can be indexed separately, the body process text and text format, so you can use all of that as facets or filters on your future search. So for now, for our example, let's just add simple fields like we need the body, we would like a content type, and we need to add a title. We're done. So you see we end up on a next page where you have all of your fields added in here, and it tells you the machine names for the fields and it tells the types. So for now, let's keep it like that and then save. All done. Now when we get back into the index, you can see that this site has 4 nodes and none of them are actually indexed. So if I go to the content, you can see that there are really 4 nodes, 2 basic pages, 2 articles, and the search API already picked up and saw all of this 4, but they're just not indexed. Let's click index now, and it will index our site. All done. Are we done, Mr. Holmes?
You've started strong. Now it's time to build your first search view. Don't forget to use the full text filter as an exposed search block, and make sure to create view of the index, not content. Then you will find your indexed field.
Oh, so we're not done. So you index, but you can't really search anything because you don't have an interface for searching. For that, you create a view. So we go into structure, views. Let's create a new view. So we click on add view and we call it Badcamp search. Here Mr. Holmes mentions that we shouldn't do a content, we should do index. So let's open this up, and sure enough we have index Badcamp index in here, and we need to create a page. And a formatted list of fields is fine for now. Let's hit save. Another instruction that we just got is that we need an expose filter to search something. So if we scroll down, you can see that we have our body exempt in here, and it says index field body. So we have all of the nodes that have been indexed on the site shown by default, but we can't search because we don't have any search interface. We click on add filter and we search for full text. There are a couple options. First, we need to expose the filter to visitors to allow them to actually integrate use the search and basically search something. So we expose this up. We have it as single filter, and we can just name it as search. And it can be contains all of these words, which means that you will, if you say apple pie, it will search for both words apple and pie. Any of these words, it will return either apple or pie results. And none of these words, that's a very weird option. It will return you all of the results that don't contain this. So I don't know who would ever use this, but that's in there. And in here you have a parse mode, which is multiple words. There is also single phrase, which is identical to when you search in Google in double quotations. And direct query, I do not recommend that, and it's useful for SOLR. And you also can see that there is a search fields, and we only have content body. So you may ask me, we just created so many other fields. We did content type and we did title. Why don't we have them in here? We have just content and body. That's a good question, and we'll take a look in a second. But before we do this, we will actually change that. You can see minimum keyword length. This is the length of words that you will allow the enter. So I would recommend to keep it 3 as our setting for the server. And we can apply. So now you can see that we have our search. Let's check if it actually works. So if I do echidna, you can see we have 2 notes about echidnas on our site, and it returned. Awesome, the search is working, but what's this other field? If I go here in configuration, search and metadata, search API, you can see if I edit the index and I go to fields, there is a difference in between how the fields are processed. The body in our case is full text, and if you remember in our view we said full text filter. Then we have a language and we have a title. So then you can say, wait, I want to be able to search the title and it's not there. So we can go back and add another title. And this is new in Search API for Drupal 8. In Drupal 7 you could only add field once in an index. In Drupal 8 you can add it multiple times in case you want to index it as a string and as full text, or as an integer and as full text, whatever your needs might be. So we scroll down, we add another title, and we click on the content type again, because we didn't add it, we're done. So you can see we have title 1, we need to set it to full text, and we have now 2 titles. You may ask me why we don't have one title and just set this to full text. There's a catch. You can only sort by strings, so you cannot sort ascending by title if it's full text, but you can filter only by full text. So you can search full text but not display and sort when it is full text. So that's why we need 2 of them. One is for sorting and one is for searching. So done that, and we save changes. And as Mr. Holmes said, we shouldn't forget to reindex. As you see, as soon as I made changes to the index, it got all unindexed again, so you need to index again. Done. I think we are done, Mr. Holmes. Everything is great and working.
You've got results, but what about relevance?
Oh, right.
Make sure you boost the correct fields in your index interface. Remember to re-index so the changes can take effect.
Yes, I completely forgot about relevance. So, as you know, Google always returns results based on the relevance. And in Drupal Search API, it's called Boost. So you can see that full text fields, because they are searchable, can get a boost. Titles are usually getting a bigger boost. So let's set it to 5. Let's save it and reindex again. And we clear all index data and we index now. Awesome. So now if I go back to our full text search, you can see that we have 2 searchable fields, body and the title. And I can also add the title in here. Now you can see the difference. There is title that says content data source and title index fields. So one is our string, one is our full text, and you always need to search for fields in a view that says index field, which means that this is actually representing an index content versus just this one coming from the content type. That's okay. We can always link it back to the content, and we will rearrange. So now you can see happy big echidna and echidna puzzle. So if I search the verb happy, it returns me happy big echidna and happy koala, because koalas are awesome too. I saved that. Is that the end?
Feeling overwhelmed?
Yeah,
Alone
there are so
on this
many
journey?
options.
Don't forget processors can help you out with common tasks.
Processors. We haven't looked into processors. What is that? Oh, here it is, tab processors. So, you know, sometimes you actually need to do some custom common tasks that everybody of us doing. Content access being the one. You wouldn't want editors or end users to be able to search content that is not having their access permissions and accidentally find something unpublished or private, or, you know, having an OG context. So you would like to enable that, so all of the search results are actually indexed with this in mind. You would like to have entity status enabled as well, so only published entities are indexed and unpublished content doesn't take too much space. There are other processors like highlight, which is basically highlight the words in the body text when you search for. HTML filter, it's pretty self-explanatory. It strips out HTML tags from the body. Ignore case is very useful one. It allows you to search for the capital or not capital letters. Ignore characters allows you to ignore certain characters like commas and dots. Stammer is actually the one that doing your partial keyword search, so that's useful to enable that. Stop words are the ones that you wouldn't like to index, like prepositions and you know, like and, to, on, in, everything that doesn't have any semantic meaning you would probably like to exclude from your index. And transliteration is useful for multilingual sites, because sometimes you don't have multilingual SOLR installed and you need a transliteration in order to transform, let's say, French characters with accents into English equivalent. And this is an order in which processors will be actually run during the indexing of the site. So first it will ignore the case, then it will ignore the characters, exclude stop words, and create the parts of the word. And when you query the site, it will check for the content access, it will check for case insensitivity, and it will exclude all of the characters that should be ignored, exclude all of the stop words, and check for the keywords. And there are some settings in here that actually allow you to do some final fine-tuning for the processor. So ignore case also allows you to choose which fields should be ignore case. So let's say you would like to ignore case only in title or only in body text, but not in titles. So you can set it up here. Ignore characters the same way, and you can see that the search API comes with a very reasonable default. Stammer, that is just something common that is used, but you can you know, extend this list by your own words that are common for your site. Or let's say you have some common custom examples. Let's say Dine and Wise created a trademark or something like that, Dine Wise, and you would like to stem it like that. So you can do it here. And stop words, as I said, all the articles and prepositions, something that are not semantic, is already excluded. So let's save. Now we can go back to our index and re-index it out. Okay, we are done, I guess. We covered all of the tabs, right, Mr. Holmes?
You found your way to the basics of Search API, but there's more to discover. You've only just scratched the surface of facets, SOLR, and custom queries. Stay curious, your partner in search, Sherlock Holmes.
Wait, what, facets? You didn't say anything about facets, and now we have to actually do something about it? Don't worry, there is another module for our help. If we go into extend, I already downloaded this one for you, so we go into facets. This one is based on the facet API that was built in Drupal 7, that was completely rebuilt for Drupal 8. And an advantage for this one, it doesn't only comes with integration with Search API, but it has this little awesome submodule core search facets that allows you faceting on a core search, on Drupal default search module. So if you don't want to use Search API, you can use this one. So let's enable this app. And now we can go to configuration, searching metadata facets. And you see it already created automatically a facet source for us. If we go to configure, you can see that it has a query string processor, we don't need a filter key, and it already comes pre-configured for our data search. So we save, and we add a facet to the source. So it will discover your facet source that was created by default. And facet source can be a views page, it can be database search page, it can be Drupal default search page. So all the available facet sources will be showing in this drop down. And then we need to define a field that we can transform into the facet. So we already have a content type. Let's add that. And let's hit save. And I would like a facets to be list of checkboxes. And we would like show amount of results. There are a lot of options to play with, but mostly they are actually influencing the representation of the facet block and the facets on the page. So you can play with them based on your design or requirements. And then we just save. So if I go back to our views, you can see that I don't see any facets. I have our exposed block, but that's it. Where is the facet? That's because facet created the block, but we need to place the block. So we'll go to the block layout, and let's say we want like a sidebar first. We click on place block, and we search for content type. So you can see the category is facets, and the block was created for us. We'll keep the title just so we know that is our block. And as you can see, I didn't configure any of the visibility settings because by default facet block will appear only on the pages that are related to the data source. So only on our view search page. And we say blocks. Since that's still in beta, it sometimes doesn't work for us, so let's hope that it does. Yay, we have our facet. And moreover, it also shows us that there are 2 articles and 2 pages. And if I click on one, it narrows our search to 2 pages that we have, 2 basic pages. And you can change it so it shows all 4 articles. Facets can be titles, can be dates, can be anything you want. And the advantage of facets is that it actually plugs into index as a little bookmarks. So when you're searching by an index, it's returning the results way faster than if you, let's say, did this with your exposed filters in the views. Because you definitely can emulate that with exposed filters, and sometimes that's a good way to do, because exposed filters are there for you and you can do pretty much everything. It just when your site is big and the index is big, the facets are way more efficient, and you also can configure so some facets disappear when they do not narrow the results, or empty facet disappear, so the end user is presented with the way of dynamic options versus process of hiding all of the available facets as you would do with expose filter and having, excuse me, there is no results, can you please try later. So that's pretty much it. We had our search adventure, and this is the last note from our Mr. Holmes. That's it. Any questions? Yeah.
Me?
Yeah.
Can you do nested facets? Like for example, I want to do narrow down for dates, and I do year and months underneath.
But you will have to do it like not with dates. You will have to do dates as taxonomies because it's a facet module supports taxonomies that are nested. But for the date ones, it still doesn't support any hierarchy, so you'll have to do something custom because date module is still being like date range just hit 8.4 core, so we're still refactoring date modules. I'm pretty sure it will be growing,
Okay,
but
thanks.
not right now. Any other questions? Yeah.
If you're doing a multilingual site, can some of those configurations be set up language per language? For example, if you're doing Chinese, you might not necessarily want to run the characters to a degree.
Yeah. So the question is, if you're doing multilingual site, would you set up the configuration language per language? And the answer is yes. So if you a like let's say a lot of stop words, that let's say your Chinese stop words are different than your English stop words, then the ideal scenario is to use two search indexes. One is for English, one is for Chinese, and configure it based on the index versus based on the language. Search API by default allows you to do it per language, but it's not very efficient because sometimes it doesn't really take into consideration differences in stop words. So stop words will be applied for both languages or for 3 languages. So if your server capacity allows, then it's better to do 2 indexes attached to the same server. And Drupal 7 in fact had a module that says multilingual entity translation multilingual SOLR that actually allowed you to create from one index 2 different indexes that basically attached the language property to your index documents. But Drupal 8 just has this module, but it doesn't do anything. It just provides the UI, but it doesn't actually functionally do anything, and just saves configuration but doesn't create the index. So for now, a workaround is creating 2 indexes, attaching it to the same search server, and then having 2 views. One is restricted for English, one is restricted for the second language. Any other questions? No? Well, thank you very much. Feel free to grab some glasses.
Oh, yeah.